So today we are going to be comparing the iPhone XR versus the LG V40, and these two do really good in video, so I'm excited for that. Right now we are looking at the front facing camera. They are both shooting at 1080p. There's a lot of snow out here right now, so I want to show how well the highlights are between these two cameras. This is the low light test of the front facing camera, and right now I'm in the middle of the park, so I'm not close to any light source at all besides the buildings and street lights. Right now the screen on the LG V40 looks a bit more noisy than the iPhone. But let's move on to the picture comparison and see which one is better. Going over to portrait mode on the front facing camera, the iPhone XR looks a lot more pleasing than the V40. Now the highlights is completely or almost washed out on the V40, whereas you can still see a little bit of the sky on the XR. As you can tell with the V40, the field of view is much more wider than the XR. With the background blur, the XR is much more creamier and smoother. It just looks more dense. And it does have a telephoto look, so it looks much more pleasing than a V40. Advantage of the wide view on a V40, you can easily take group photos or group selfies rather than the iPhone where it really only focuses on yourself or just one person. Going to the back camera, right out the bat, again you can tell that the V40 is much more wider than the XR. So I had to take a couple more steps to get the same picture as the XR, and just like the front facing camera with the LG V40, the sky is blown out and the whites or all the highlights are pretty much mushed together, so I really don't see as much texture. On the XR you can clearly tell that there's a road behind Darien, and on a V40 you can't really tell. A big advantage on a V40 is that you can still take portrait-like pictures with objects, while the XR you need a face to get that blurry depth of field. Another advantage is that the V40 has 3 cameras on the back, so the wide angle view is basically the best thing, or my favorite thing about the V40. It really takes the picture to another level, and when you're in tight spaces, you can get more of the picture. In terms of the color and quality on the wide lens and the normal lens in the V40, in daylight they're really close to each other, so you're not really losing much unless you're shooting in really low light situations. And throughout these pictures, the iPhone XR does look more cooler, and on the V40 it's a lot more yellow. Also, the iPhone is known for its flatter look, whereas the V40 there's a bit more contrast in its photos. For dynamic range, I gotta give it to the XR, even though the V40 still does a good job. So in the shadows, you can clearly tell that there's a lot more detail in the XR versus the V40. So overall, in the daytime shots, the XR has a much more flatter look, and in the shadows you can still see some more details, and it holds really great in the highlights. For the V40, it's much more contrastier, so a lot of things sticks out more, especially darker spots. Now moving on to low light or nighttime. I gotta say that the XR is more flat, which is obvious, and the colors aren't as punchy as the V40. The more contrast look on the V40 makes the picture just pop out more than the XR. So if I were looking at this as a final picture that I want to share in social media, I'm leaning towards the V40 because the picture just stands out more than the XR. I do like the portrait mode on the XR because the colors are more consistent, you can see more detail in the shadows, and the skin tone is much more natural and warmer. And when you're capturing neon lights, I would say that the XR produces more of a color that you see in real life, and it looks less washed out. So in low light, the quality of the pictures is really good. It's just how they render out different images. One's more flat, one's more contrastier, so it really depends on your personal preference. Moving on to video, we are shooting in 4K 30, and the stabilization looks really similar to each other. They're pretty much even. I can't really tell which one is better. And it's obvious that the iPhone XR is really going for that cooler look, whereas with the LG V40, it's pushing towards the yellow side. Now taking the snow away, the XR is still pushing a little bit more to the cooler side. It's harder to tell here, but the next example is HDR. On the iPhone XR, you can still tell what's in the shadows. You can still see more detail beyond those trees, whereas with the LG V40, I can't really see anything beyond it because it's too dark. Both of these phones really make the color pop, but I would say the LG V40 still got the nice vibrant greens going on. Now using this sign as another example, the orange really looks much more natural on the LG V40. I can still see that reflection going on, whereas on the XR, it kind of looks too overproduced or too overdone, whereas the color kind of looks a bit fake. Now shooting in 4K 60, there's no stabilization there, and the color rendition is still the same. The iPhone's much more cooler, whereas the LG V40, it's more on the yellowish side. Now moving on to low light or nighttime video, the stabilization is good on both phones, but on the LG V40 it's a little bit more stabilized, but you do see more macro jitters. Yes, there is a little bit more swing on the iPhone XR, but the overall image is a little bit cleaner. In my opinion, I would choose XR because of that cleaner image, and it's still stabilized. Both phones hold their colors really well and they're sharp. Of course, the XR is just a bit sharper. Now shooting in 4K 60, there's no stabilization, so the quality of sharpness should be relatively the same. When looking at lights, especially like blues and reds, I find that on the iPhone XR, it's a bit more vivid and vibrant than the LG V40. The XR also holds the highlights really well. As you can tell by the side flags, you can clearly see all the text on the flag, whereas the LG V40, it's kind of blown out. So overall, both of these phones are really good. They're not too far from each other in terms of quality, but of course they produce different colors, and some of them have different advantages over the other. Like the LG V40, it has the wide angle and you can still take portrait-like pictures on objects. The only disadvantage for me on the LG V40 is the highlights. I feel like if they tone it down a little bit, then it would be a better image. What I do like on the XR more is the portrait mode. I feel like the background blur is more natural, and overall the colors, I just feel like it's more warmer and more pleasing for a portrait look. And the shadows in the XR, where you can see a lot more information going on versus the LG V40. So that is my comparison between these two phones. Let me know what you guys think of each phone and which one you think is better. If you're interested, links will be down below. If you found this video helpful, give it a good like and subscribe. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.